An uptick of violence on the Israel-Gaza border as the Israeli military strikes a number of Hamas targets in the besieged Strip. After 2 rockets were launched into southern Israel, we'll be live with our defence correspondent. Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren speaks out to I-24 News after US President Donald Trump stirs controversy with his comments on Jewish voters and their loyalty. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to meet Iranian leaders ahead of the G20 summit as both parties look for ways to defuse the situation between the Islamic Republic and the West. Hello, I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. We begin here in the region where the already tense situation is growing increasingly worse, with the Israel Defense Forces striking a number of targets in the Gaza Strip overnight, including a Hamas naval post in the northern part of the Strip after 2 missiles were launched just a few hours ago from the Palestinian enclave. Now, these projectiles fell in open areas with no injuries or deaths reported on either side. This as Palestinian factions, including Hamas, have been warning Israel that it must adhere to a number of demands by this weekend, otherwise an escalation is imminent. And let's bring in Or Bar-Ilan, who's a resident of the Gaza border. Or, thank you so much for joining me. Give me a little bit of a rundown as to exactly what happened there on the border overnight.
Hi, good morning. Yesterday night, as usual for the past week, were 2 rockets. The red alarm didn't go on. It fell on the field right next to the kibbutz. And then the IDF attacked Gaza. Somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning, there was another launch from Gaza toward Israel. And then the IDF responded again. And for now, we don't know what's going to happen. From what I can tell and from what the people in the kibbutz are saying, Bibi is going to pay them the Qatari money so we can have quiet times till the election. But the coming hours will tell.
And or tell me exactly what it feels like when you hear these missiles coming overhead and the thud when it hits the earth. Tell me, what is the feeling in the kibbutz there and the tension as people are running to these safe zones, these shelters there? What does it feel like?
I can tell you from the perspective of someone that works with small children in the kindergarten. I'm working there. And it really affects the kids. Yesterday, we had a slumber party in the kindergarten, and it was very tense. Instead of enjoying and watching the movie quietly, everyone was so tense, and the parents were coming earlier to pick their children. And it just really affects our normal lives here. Everything can interrupt in a minute. You can see, like, for example, yesterday, we didn't even have a red alarm. The rocket just fell, and we can hear it. Even though it fell in the field, we can still hear it. Or
Bar-Ilan, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's now bring in our defence correspondent, Jonathan Regev, who is on the phone. Jonathan, this is the 3rd time in just 1 week, and we are, of course, heading up to a second round of Israeli elections, September 17. Tell me, how normal is this escalation?
Unfortunately, it is becoming quite normal. This abnormal situation is becoming normal for the people living there, and that is, of course, very sad because they are unfortunately becoming captives or used to the fact that they have to run to shelters every few nights. As you mentioned, this is the 3rd time in a week in which Hamas launches rockets towards Israel. 6 rockets altogether, 1 on Friday night, 3 on Saturday night, and 2 last night. Does it have to do with the Qatari money that is set to come in this coming weekend? Most probably, yes. We've seen in previous cases that every time that a new dose of Qatari money is set to come in, Hamas is sending a message to Israel through those rockets, telling Israel, make sure the money comes in without any trouble, or else you'll see more rockets. They've even said it with words earlier this week. Hamas is saying that unless Israel leads up to its promises, including this Qatari money, there will be an uptick in violence. So this is basically the way of Hamas to negotiate with Israel And if it worked for them in previous times, there's no reason to think it would not work again.
And Jonathan, tell me, how can we expect this to escalate further, if in fact it does?
Of course, we'll have to see. We saw the usual Israeli response, which is targeting Hamas posts, but empty Hamas posts, and making sure there are no casualties. If the Qatari money will come in this weekend, we'll probably see some sort of a decrease in tensions. But if the money does not come in, then Hamas will not only allow those factions in Gaza to fire rockets here and there towards an open area, but they might actually direct them to inhabited areas, maybe to Sderot, maybe to Ashkelon, the big city in the area, or to the communities along the Gaza border. They made sure that the rockets overnight landed in an open area. If those rockets are set towards Israeli communities and in larger numbers, and of course that might signal a greater escalation.
Jonathan Regev there on the phone. Thanks so much for the update, and we'll come back to you a little later on in the day. Let's go now to Mohammed Najib, who's a Palestinian defence expert, joining me from Haifa. Mohammed, thank you so much. We are just under 1 month away from the Israeli elections, and we know that Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he will not deter from a broad Gaza operation, but seems unlikely. Tell me, do you believe Hamas could be taking advantage of this, you could call it, politically lenient time?
Yes, Hamas is taking advantage of the Israeli elections, and I think that the Israeli Prime Minister wouldn't go on a military operation against Gaza, so they try to expand and to increase the political pressure on Israel through firing rockets from time to time. But maybe they said it's controlled and calculated, but what could be miscalculated if those rockets or projectiles lead to some casualties among the Israelis, then there is no other option for the Prime Minister and the IDF is to go for escalation and for a wide operation against Hamas in Gaza.
And Mohammed, let's talk now about this Qatari money. It was expected to come in overnight, didn't arrive, and we have, as you said, heard Hamas warning that if it didn't receive it, there would be more rockets, there would be an escalation. Tell me, can we now expect more? Will Hamas live up to, what it's been saying?
Hamas wants the Qatari funds to pay salaries for its employees and some thousands of Palestinian poor families in Gaza who get used to get $100 a month from the Qatari money. But there are some restrictions and conditional how to allow those money to come to Gaza, to Hamas. And as you know, the Israeli political parties criticized the Prime Minister for allowing the transfer of the funds to Hamas in Gaza. So maybe for this reason, there is a postponement and delay in the arrival of those money. And this will increase Hamas' anger. And they try to escalate to practice political pressure and to practice more pressure in Israel to allow the transfer of the money and to more fuel for the power plant in Gaza.
And Mohammed, finally, we have heard a few people come out to say that they believe Hamas is losing its grip of power on the Strip. Tell me, what do you have to say about that?
The people in Gaza live in a very miserable situation, and they feel that the 2 million are punished because of Hamas control the Gaza Strip, and Hamas couldn't provide them with the services and the promised improvement that they promised to do. They blaming the Israeli government for procrastination of implementation, what they understood about, what they agreed about under Egyptian and Qatari supervision. But until the elections, there is no much progress expected to happen.
Mohammed Najib there in Israel's north in Haifa. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going out for a short break, but when we come back, Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren speaks to I-24 News after US President Donald Trump stirred controversy with his comments on Jewish voters and their loyalty. All of that and plenty more when we come back. Stay with us.
Our world is moving so fast. The internet, social media, blogger spin, and opinion. Where do you turn for the real story? The latest information, expert analysis, and a fresh perspective on the trending news of the day. I'm Derek Dennis. Give me 30 minutes. Take 30. Only on I-24 News.
From the deeply personal to the universally shared. From the local story to the global picture. From the politics shaping our world to the people most affected by them. High Definition will take you on a journey that will spark your curiosity and speak to your heart, combining in-depth interviews, original reporting, and riveting storytelling with the fascinating world of documentaries.
Politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Brace yourself for your daily dose of news. I'm Jeff Smith. Join me every day for a fast-paced breakdown of major international stories with an emphasis on live reporting. An analysis of news you need to know. We'll track the headlines quickly, expertly, in a dose you can handle.
I'm Jordana Miller at I-24 News. Join me for the Holy Land Uncovered, a look at this remarkable land filled with so much faith and history and archaeology.
Watch Holy Land Uncovered. Only on I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's go now to the fallout from the decision not to allow Democratic Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib entering Israel, with US President Donald Trump then saying that Jews who vote for Democrats are disloyal. And Israeli President Reuven Rivlin has spoken on the phone to Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as a pair attempt to try and maintain the alliance between the US and Israel. Rivlin telling Pelosi that the relationship is not dependent on the relationship with one particular party and is a link between people, which relies on historical ties, deep and strong friendships and shared values. This according to a statement from the president's office. Here's Trump doubling down on loyalty remarks.
In my opinion, you vote for a Democrat, you're being very disloyal to Jewish people and you're being very disloyal to Israel. And only weak people would say anything other than that.
Meanwhile, one of the leading Democratic presidential candidates, Elizabeth Warren, has spoken to I-24 News regarding Trump's comments. Let's take a listen.
The president's comments are disgusting. And once again, Donald Trump trying to distract from the fact that he is a failing president by every measure. But he is trying to keep people focused somewhere else. And I just don't think anyone takes that seriously.
Staying in the US and the crisis on the border with Mexico, and Washington has unveiled a rule which is set to allow authorities to detain migrant families indefinitely as judges look at ways to grant them asylum in America, scrapping a previous 20-day limit. Now, this as Trump has come out to say that Washington is seriously looking at ending the right of citizenship for children born to non-citizens within the country as the crackdown on immigration continues.
No child should be a pawn in a scheme to manipulate our immigration system, which is why the new rule eliminates the incentive to exploit children as a free ticket, or as one gentleman in Guatemala told me, a passport for migration to the United States.
Let's move on. And French President Emmanuel Macron has come out to say that he'll use this weekend's G20 summit in France as a platform to try and diffuse the situation between the West and Iran. Macron telling journalists that he'll meet Iranian officials ahead of the summit to make proposals to bring down tensions, which have been on the uptick as US President Donald Trump pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions on the Iranian economy and its leaders. Moving now to Israeli politics, and with around 3 weeks to go until the next round of elections, parties are making final deals ahead of the polls. And as tensions rise ahead of the elections, the head of the Joint Arab List says that she's willing to join the centre-left coalition as far-right parties are calling for the Joint Arab List to be banned. This according to Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot. Now to Netanyahu's main political rival party, the Blue and White Party, which was created just before the April election, and polling is about even with the ruling Likud party. Now, in most voter surveys, it's getting its second chance at unseating Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu come September 17. Our diplomatic correspondent Ellie Hockenberg looks at who's involved and how the campaign is going.
3 ex-generals and 1 centrist leader joining forces in what was perceived to be a potential political game changer, and indeed a remarkable achievement of 35 out of 120 parliamentary seats at stake. But was it just beginner's luck, or will they be able to convince Israelis they're the next ruling party?
Blue and White looked at the last campaign that was criticized from right and left, mainly from the left, that they are anemic, that they're not appearing enough in the media, that Gantz is not a sufficiently authoritative figure. And with all this criticism, they got 35 Knesset seats, equal to the Likud. So the perception there is not to start going crazy and reinvent themselves, but to go more or less along the same route.
They are trying to be above the fray. They do not attack, they do not publish provocative videos like Ehud Barak. The media might be bored with this, but if they want to be seen as the responsible adult, able to lead the country, then they're doing it right. They will have to step it up eventually.
But what's happening around them might be the least of their problems. Reports on ongoing disagreements within the party's leadership, the cockpit, as it is dubbed here in Israel, continue to emerge, and public conflicting statements are not a rare occurrence either.
If there were no elections now, this political constellation would probably have broken down into at least 2 parts. It's not that there is no appreciation of each other, but as we say here in Israel, there's a lot of ego and it's hard to contain it in one place. They will say that love blooms. It does not bloom. It's hard.
So is this the beginning of this political experiment or the beginning of the end? The September election results will be the main way to answer this question.
Now, Tamar Nafar is one of the most popular rappers here in Israel. He's also quite a provocative one. So much so that when the Council of the Northern Arab Israeli city of Al-Fahim heard his songs, it decided to cancel his show completely.
The Facebook post was dry, almost technical. The head of the Council of Al-Fahim decided to cancel Tamar Nafar's show, it said, since it doesn't comply with the city's religious and cultural values. Tamar Nafar is an unusual phenomenon in Israel, an Arab rapper whose songs are a protest against almost everything in his everyday life. His arrows are aimed at everyone. No one and nothing is immune, from the relations between Israel and its Arab citizens to violence against women. Nafar was supposed to take the stage in Al-Fahim in northern Israel as part of a project for the city's youngsters, but the head of the city's council decided otherwise. The Facebook storm arrived immediately. "Well done. It's time we stop having events that make God angry," commented one person. "Does the sound of shooting we hear every night comply with the city's religious and cultural values?" someone else commented, referring to the violent shootouts that the city suffers from. One social activist, Muhammad Mahajana, vowed to fight the city's decision in court. "This isn't the only opinion in Al-Fahim. Many here do want to hear Nafar's songs," he said. Adi Koplowitz, I-24 News.
Fires are raging at a record rate in Brazil's Amazon rainforest, with scientists warning that it could strike a devastating blow to the fight against climate change. NASA satellite images you can see soon, created by these fires, are spotted from space. Now, the Amazon rainforest is the largest on Earth, roughly half the size of the United States. The smoke from the fires has already reached all the way to Sao Paulo, which is more than 1,700 100 miles away. Brazil's far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, though, is accusing NGOs of burning down the rainforest to hurt his government, taking to social media claiming that everything indicates that NGOs are going to set the Amazon on fire. Now, with biodiversity around the world in crisis, hundreds of thousands of species are at risk of extinction. Tens of thousands more are being poached in order to turn a profit on the black market. Our correspondent Emily Francis takes us to an international conference in Geneva where activists and policymakers are literally trying to make laws to protect the Earth's most vulnerable creatures.
Sharks, dolphins, rays and turtles are among the marine life that has activists bubbling over with determination.
No more fishing, no more mortality, so no more sharks were to be killed in the North Atlantic from today. Scientists estimate it will be 2070 until the population recovers.
The population declines we've recorded are so steep that these rays are now considered the most threatened marine group on Earth.
Representatives from 180 countries, including Israel, have been in Geneva at the World Wildlife Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, known as CITES.
CITES is, after all, about balance between the need to protect species of plants and animals from extinction and the need for nations to use these resources for trade, for growth, and for development.
The conference is held every 3 years where the international community will decide on 56 proposals to strengthen the level of protection among 36,000 vulnerable and endangered species.
We're very concerned at the prospect of further sales of stockpiled ivory. We saw the last sale back in 2008, and the following decade we've lost 100,000 savanna elephants, 60% of the forest elephants in Africa.
A top priority, protecting African rhinos and elephants from being killed by poachers just to take and illegally sell their ivory tusks. There are about 400,000 elephants left in the wild, but reports say poachers kill as many as 30,000 every year. Even the giraffe population is said to have shrunk 40% in the past few decades.
The assessment confirms that nature's dangerous decline is unprecedented. The rate of wildlife extinction is accelerating, with experts affirming that up to 1 million species are now threatened.
The gathering follows the first comprehensive UN report on biodiversity, warning that extinction is looming over 1 million species of plants and animals. And just days ago, the Trump administration announced plans to water down the U.S. Endangered Species Act.
2020 will be the super year for environmental decision-making. Paris will go into effect, the CBD post-2020 framework, the Oceans Conference.
But attempts by nations like Senegal and the Maldives to self-protect their wildlife gives leaders hope that change is possible. Emily Francis, I-24 News.
And finally, a viral post on Facebook is asking for millions of people to visit Area 51, the top secret location infamous for conspiracy theories on UFOs. And now officials are fighting back, voting for a pre-emergency order to prepare for the event. I-24 News correspondent Ariel Hickson has the story.
With a population of just over 5,000 people, Lincoln County, Nevada is used to a slower pace.
Basically, the only business in town is the little alien. That's it.
But nestled in that quiet county is Area 51, a top-secret military base about 80 miles from Las Vegas, recognized for being the subject of infamous conspiracy theories of UFOs and alien activity, and movies like Independence Day.
Welcome to Earth.
Earlier this summer, a viral Facebook event put the site back on the map. Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop Us All, called on curious folks around the world to flock to the desolate desert.
I said, good luck. You know, I mean, it was a joke. I knew it was a joke. I knew nobody would be stupid enough to cross there. But No, guess I was wrong.
Now 2 million people are expected to not only storm Area 51 on September 20th, but also attend Alienstock, a music festival in the same town that weekend. In response, commissioners in Lincoln County voted to pre-sign an emergency declaration so the state of Nevada could help them with resources.
Base security will be on high alert. They will not be messing around. If you go near the boundary, if you even look like you want to cross the boundary, you will get arrested.
The chair of commissioners in Lincoln County spoke to I-24 News saying, "We know that there's going to be at least 10,000 people. That's the bottom line. Nobody really knows for sure because of the other events going on across the stage exactly how many people are coming. We are more or less preparing for the worst and hoping for the best." The commissioners are expected to get a better estimate of the population expected for the event and make their final decision on the emergency declaration in early September. Ariel Hickson, I-24 News.
And that is all we have time for this edition of I-24 News, but we are continuing to bring you all of the breaking stories, so go ahead, visit us online, i24news.tv. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.